The Korean Mafia boss's baby wouldn't stop crying on the plane until a black woman did something that made him freeze. The cries tore through the private jet like something primal and raw, each shriek climbing higher, sharper, more desperate. The kind of sound that burrowed under skin and made even strangers want to fix it, soothe it, make it stop. But the leather seats remained occupied by silent, rigid bodies, eyes forward, jaws tight. No one moved, because the man holding the screaming infant was Kang Jae-min. And you didn't interrupt Kang Jae-min. He sat motionless in the center seat, swallowed by charcoal fabric so precisely tailored it looked like armor. Gold gleamed at his wrist, catching light with each shallow breath. Dark ink crawled up the side of his neck, ancient symbols that promised violence, loyalty, blood oaths kept in shadows. His face could have been carved from stone for all the emotion it showed, but his hands trembled, just slightly, just enough. Inside, Jamin was coming apart at the seams. This wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a power play he could flip with the right words or the right threat. Money meant nothing here. Fear meant nothing. The silent authority that made grown men flinch and obey, useless. His son, Jun Seo, arched against him, face flushed crimson, fists clenched like he was fighting an invisible enemy. 2 months old. 2 months since the child's mother had hemorrhaged on a marble floor while Jamin held her hand and felt his world crack in half. 2 months since Kang Jae-min, a man who commanded empires built on fear, had become something he'd never prepared for. A single father, helpless. "Sir?" One of his men leaned in, voice barely audible over the wailing. "We can reroute, land early, find a—" "No!" The word was silk over steel. "We hold course." The guard retreated instantly, but Junseo didn't care about courses or schedules or the fact that his father's word could erase entire bloodlines. The baby only knew hunger, discomfort, and the gaping absence of the warmth he'd been torn from too soon. Jamin had tried everything. Bottles prepared exactly as the hired nanny had instructed. Pacifiers in 3 different shapes, rocking motions that felt foreign and clumsy in arms more accustomed to violence than comfort. Nothing worked. Nothing even came close. 4 rows back, Nia Carter felt her chest constrict before her brain even registered the sound. Her body knew that cry. Her breasts ached in phantom response. Muscle memory from nights spent in a nursery that now sat empty. She pressed her fingers hard into the armrest, fighting the visceral pull, the instinct that wanted to rise and answer a call that was no longer hers to answer. She closed her eyes, breathing through the wave of grief that never quite receded. 9 months. It had been 9 months since she'd held her niece, her sister's baby girl, the child she'd helped raise after the funeral, the infant who'd become hers in every way but blood. 9 months since the tiny heart had simply stopped. SIDS, the doctors said. Sudden infant death syndrome. As if naming it made the nightmare comprehensible. Naya had been flying home from a corporate crisis training in Seoul, trying to rebuild something resembling a life. She was a trauma response consultant, someone companies called. When everything went catastrophically wrong, she specialized in de-escalation, in reading human behavior under extreme stress, and she knew exactly what that sound meant. The crying shifted, growing thinner, more desperate. Not anger, not discomfort. Terror. "Ma'am." A flight attendant paused beside her seat, concern creasing her face. "Are you all right?" Nia looked up, then toward the source of the cries. Her hands were shaking. "That baby," she said quietly. "He's not just fussy. He's—" She stopped herself. "I work in crisis de-escalation. Maybe I can help." The attendant's expression flickered between hope and uncertainty. "The passenger has been very clear about refusing assistance, but if you'd like to try—" Naya unbuckled before she could think better of it. Each step down the aisle felt like walking toward a cliff edge in the dark. She could feel eyes tracking her movement, not the civilians, but the others. The men in dark suits positioned at careful intervals, their hands rested too casually near their jackets, calculating, assessing threat level and response time. Then she saw him. Kang Jae-min looked like violence wrapped in expensive fabric, black hair swept back from a face all sharp angles and harder edges, cheekbones that could cut, a jaw that didn't know how to yield, and eyes so dark they seemed to pull light into themselves and give nothing back. Ink curled up his throat like smoke. Power radiated from him in waves that made every survival instinct scream at her to turn around, sit down, mind her own business. But the baby in his arms looked impossibly small against that broad chest, fragile, lost, and Nia's empty arms remembered what it felt like to hold a child who needed her. She stopped beside his seat. Slowly, deliberately, she met his eyes. "What are you doing?" His voice was quiet, controlled, lethal. Nia didn't flinch. "Your baby isn't crying because he's uncomfortable," she said evenly. "He's crying because he's terrified." The words hung in the air between them. Junseo's cries faltered for just a heartbeat, as if even he sensed the shift in the room. Jaemin's fingers tightened reflexively around his son, and something flickered behind those dark eyes. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. This was the moment everything changed. Though neither of them knew it yet, this was the moment Kang Jaemin's carefully constructed world began to crack, and Nia Carter, who'd spent 9 months running from her grief, was about to walk straight into the eye of a storm that would either destroy them both or forge something neither expected. But to understand what happened next, you'd have to know who they really were, what they'd survived, what they'd lost, and why, despite every logical reason to walk away, neither of them could. You've just seen the moment that changed everything for him, and for her. But this story doesn't stop here. What happens next will test loyalty, fear, and the price of kindness in ways you won't expect. If you want to continue this journey and see how their lives collide after this moment, subscribe now and stay with the story. Nia didn't remember sitting down. One moment she'd been standing beside Kang Jaemin, watching Junseo's breathing, even out against her chest. The next, she was in the seat, the baby's weight warm and real, and Jaemin was staring at her like she'd performed surgery instead of simple co-regulation. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. "I didn't do anything," Nia said. "He did. Babies borrow calm when they can't generate their own. It's neurobiology, not magic." But the way Jaemin looked at her, like she'd solved an equation no one else could see, made her pulse kick uncomfortably. She held Junseo for the rest of the flight, 27 minutes that felt suspended outside time. When the wheels touched down at Incheon, the baby stirred but didn't wake, and Nia felt every eye in the cabin turn toward her. Not curious, calculating. Jaemin took his son back with hands that were steadier now, though something raw still lingered in his expression. "Thank you," he said, and it sounded like a vow. Nia stood, smoothed her blazer. "He'll need consistency, routine, someone calm." "He'll have it." She nodded, turned toward the exit with the other passengers. A suited man blocked her path before she'd taken 3 steps. "Ms. Carter, Mr. Kang requests a moment of your time." It wasn't phrased as a question. The private lounge was all sharp edges and glass. Nia stood by the window overlooking the tarmac, arms crossed, trying to ignore the flutter of unease in her chest. When Jaemin entered, he was alone. Junseo had been handed off somewhere safe, she hoped. "You're not in trouble," he said immediately. "Then why does this feel like an interrogation?" His mouth almost curved. Almost. He moved to the bar, poured water into 2 glasses with surgical precision, offered her one. She took it, but didn't drink. "In my family," Jaemin began, voice low, measured, "there is a belief. When someone outside the bloodline calms the air when the parent cannot, that person becomes bound to the child's fate." Nia's grip tightened on the glass. "That's superstition." "Perhaps." His dark eyes held hers, unflinching. "But my people saw what happened. They will talk, and in my world, perception is reality." "I'm a trauma consultant," Nia said firmly. "What I did was apply science. Your son was dysregulated. I provided regulation. There's no mysticism involved." "And yet," Jaemin said softly, stepping closer, "it worked when nothing else did. You held my air, Ms. Carter. That means something to those who serve me." and to those who oppose me." The words settled like ice in her stomach. "I didn't ask for that." "I know." He pulled a matte black card from his jacket, pressed it into her palm. "But it exists regardless. My direct line. If anything unusual happens, anyone watching, any contact that feels wrong, you call immediately." Nia stared at the card. "You're protecting me from a threat I didn't consent to creating." "I'm acknowledging reality." His voice gained an edge. "You touch my son. In my world, that's not neutral. It's a declaration." She should throw the card back, walk out, forget this ever happened. She pocketed it instead. "I leave for the States in 2 days." "Good." But he didn't look relieved. He looked like a man calculating variables. "That gives us time." "For what?" "To ensure you leave safely." Across the city, in a restaurant with no name and no sign, Lee Sung-ho set down his phone with deliberate care. "The American woman?" his lieutenant asked. "Confirmed." She calmed the Kang air. Sung-ho smiled without warmth. "An outsider, no visible ties to the organization." "Then she's no one." "She's someone Kang Jae-min allowed near his son." Sung-ho lifted his glass. "That makes her valuable. Leverage, properly applied, can topple kingdoms." "Orders?" "Watch her. I want to know everywhere she goes, everyone she speaks to." The smile sharpened. "And when the time is right, we'll see what the great Kang Jae-min is willing to sacrifice for a stranger." Nia stepped into Seoul's humid night and felt it instantly. The crawling sensation between her shoulder blades, the awareness of being observed. She turned, scanning the crowd at arrivals. Families. Travelers. Nothing unusual. But the feeling didn't fade. In her pocket, the black card felt heavier than it should. She pulled out her phone, finger hovering over the number, then stopped herself. Paranoid. Jet-lagged. Projecting trauma onto shadows. Even as her taxi pulled into traffic, even as the city lights blurred past, Nia couldn't shake one certainty. Somewhere in this city, someone was watching. And they knew exactly who she was. The first sign came at breakfast. Nia sat in the hotel cafe, laptop open, reviewing case files for a client meeting she'd scheduled before everything went sideways. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago. She hadn't noticed. What she did notice was the man in the gray jacket. He'd been at the airport, then outside her hotel last night, now here, 3 tables away, pretending to read a newspaper like it was still 2005. Her pulse kicked, but she kept her expression neutral. Finished her email. Closed the laptop with deliberate calm. When she stood, she made eye contact. He didn't look away. Message received. The envelope was slipped under her door while she was in the shower. No postage, no return address, just her name in precise Korean characters someone had translated to English below. Nia Carter. Inside, a single photograph. Her. Walking to the cafe that morning. The angle suggested a rooftop, a telephoto lens. Professional. No note. No threat. They didn't need one. Nia's hands were steady as she pulled out the black card. Hesitated. She'd spent 9 months learning to handle her own crises, to stop needing people who couldn't stay. She dialed anyway. Jamin answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" Not hello. Not who is this. Like he'd been waiting. "My hotel. I received a... Don't leave the room. I'm 12 minutes away." The line went dead. He arrived in 10. Nia opened the door to find Kang Jae-min in dark slacks and a white shirt rolled to his forearms, ink visible against his skin. No guards. No entourage. Just him, radiating controlled urgency. "Show me," he said. She handed him the envelope. His jaw tightened as he studied the photograph, then flipped it over as if expecting more. "Lee Sung-ho. He runs the Busan operations. Import, extortion, human trafficking." Jamin's voice went cold. "He's been looking for leverage against my family for 2 years. And now he thinks he's found it." Nia crossed her arms. "Because I calmed a crying baby. Because you succeeded where I failed. In front of witnesses." He looked at her, something fierce and frustrated in his expression. "In my world, that's not kindness. It's connection, and connection is currency. So what do you want me to do? Hide? Run back to the States and hope they lose interest? Yes. No. The word came out harder than she intended. I don't hide from threats, Mr. Kang. I've built a career managing them. I'm not going to collapse because someone took my photograph. This isn't corporate espionage. He stepped closer, voice dropping. These men don't issue warnings. They take what they want and erase the evidence. You're not equipped. I'm not helpless. I never said you were. His eyes held hers. But you're exposed, and that's on me. The words hung between them, weighted with something that felt too much like guilt. Before Nea could respond, his phone buzzed. He answered in rapid Korean, his expression shifting from controlled to something darker. When he hung up, he looked like he was holding back violence. What? Nea asked. Jun Seo. He won't stop crying. Jaemin's voice was tight. The nanny tried everything. He's been screaming for 20 minutes. Nea felt her chest constrict. You need to go. Come with me. What? Come with me, he repeated, already moving toward the door. If the bond is real, if he's connected to you somehow, then you're the only one who can help him. Every logical part of her brain screamed no. This was insane, dangerous. A single act of compassion shouldn't chain her to a mafia boss and his infant son. But the sound of a baby crying in desperation, phantom or real, made her body move before her mind could object. Fine, but just to calm him. Then I leave. Jaemin's expression said he didn't believe her. She wasn't sure she believed herself. The penthouse was sterile, expensive, immaculate, and utterly devoid of warmth. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's skyline, but inside it felt like a mausoleum. Jun Seo's cries echoed through marble and glass. The nanny, a woman in her 50s with exhausted eyes, looked near tears herself. I'm sorry, Mr. Kang. He won't. It's all right, Jaemin's tone gentled. Take a break. She fled gratefully. Nea moved toward the nursery on instinct. Jun Seo lay in a crib that probably cost more than her car, face red, fists flailing. The moment she stepped into the room, his cries shifted, not stopping, but changing pitch, searching. She reached down, lifted him carefully. The silence was immediate. Jun Seo hiccuped, pressed his face into her shoulder, and went utterly still. Behind her, Jaemin exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. This isn't normal, Nea said quietly, swaying slightly. Babies don't imprint on strangers like this. He's grieving, Jaemin's voice was rough. He knows his mother is gone. Maybe he recognizes something in you. Someone else who understands loss. Nea closed her eyes against the ache in her chest. I can't stay, she whispered. I know. He needs stability, routine, not, I know, Jaemin repeated. But when she looked at him, his expression said something else entirely. Please. The word hung unspoken between them. Jun Seo's breathing evened out, warm and steady against her collarbone. 1 week, Nea heard herself say. I'll stay 1 week. Help establish routines. Train your nanny. Then... The window exploded inward. Glass rained down in a glittering storm. Nea's body reacted before thought, curling around Jun Seo, dropping to the floor, shielding him with everything she had. Jaemin was already moving, phone to his ear, voice lethal calm, even as blood ran from a cut on his temple. On the floor, amid the shattered glass, lay a brick wrapped in paper. Jaemin unwrapped it with steady hands. 5 words in English. We know where she sleeps. He looked at Nea, still curled protectively around his son, and something in his expression shifted from concern to absolute resolve. You're not leaving, he said quietly. Not until they're dead. The penthouse was a fortress pretending to be a home. Nea noticed it immediately. The way guards appeared and disappeared like ghosts, stationed at every entrance, but never acknowledged. The clean room where Jaemin took calls, soundproofed and swept for surveillance daily, the locked drawer in his study that everyone pretended not to see. Even the silence had weight here, deliberate, controlled. She'd been here 3 days, and she still flinched at the quiet. Junseo didn't seem to mind. He slept better now, waking only twice a night instead of every hour. The nanny, Mrs. Choi, watched Nia with a mixture of relief and wariness, like she couldn't decide if this stranger was salvation or threat. Nia understood. She hadn't decided either. The first night, Nia woke to crying at 2 a.m. She found Jaemin in the nursery, standing over the crib with his hands clenched at his sides. Junseo screamed, face crimson, and Jaemin just stood there, frozen. "How long has he been crying?" Nia asked from the doorway. Jaemin's shoulders tensed. 15 minutes. His voice was raw. "I should be able to do this. You're trying to logic your way through instinct." She moved beside him, lifted Junseo gently. The crying didn't stop immediately, but it shifted, became searching instead of desperate. "He doesn't need you to be perfect. He needs you to be present." She settled into the rocking chair, humming low. Junseo's fists unclenched gradually. Jaemin watched from the shadows, and when he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "She used to sing to him, 'My wife,' before he was born." A pause. "I never learned the words." Nia looked up, found his face etched with something beyond grief. Guilt, maybe. Or regret for all the things left unsaid. "Babies don't need words," she said softly. "Just rhythm. Consistency." The feeling of being held, Junseo's breathing evened out. Jaemin was still standing there when she looked up again. "You should sleep," she said. "So should you. One of us is better at this." "That," he said quietly, "is the problem." On the fourth night, she found him in the kitchen at 3 a.m., staring at a cup of tea he hadn't touched. Nia poured herself water, leaned against the counter. "Can't sleep?" "I keep thinking about the brick." His fingers traced the rim of the cup. "How close it came to hitting you, to hitting him. But it didn't. This time." His jaw tightened. "My father used to say the empire protects the family. That power keeps us safe." He looked up, eyes dark and hollow. "But all it's done is paint targets on everyone I love." The word hung in the air, love, and Nia wasn't sure if he meant his son or something wider, something that terrified him. "How did she die?" Nia asked. "Your wife." A muscle jumped in his cheek. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. "Hemorrhage. Post-delivery." His voice was carefully flat. "The doctor said it was rare, unpreventable. But I keep thinking, if I'd chosen a different hospital, if I'd hired better specialists, if I'd been anyone other than who I am." "You can't logic your way out of grief either," Nia said gently. His eyes met hers, and something cracked in his expression. "How do you do it? After losing your niece, how do you hold Junseo without breaking?" The question hit like a fist to the sternum. Nia set down her glass, with shaking hands. "I break every time," she admitted. "Every time I pick him up, I feel her. Remember her weight, her smell, the way she'd grab my finger." She swallowed hard. "But I hold him anyway. Because the breaking means I loved her enough to still feel it." Jaemin stood slowly, moved around the counter. He stopped close enough that she could feel his warmth, see the exhaustion carved into the edges of his face. I'm sorry," he said, "for bringing you into this, for needing you when I should be able to." "Stop." Nia looked up at him. "You're allowed to need help. That doesn't make you weak." "In my world it does." "Then maybe," she said quietly, "your world is wrong." The words settled between them like a challenge, like a truth too dangerous to acknowledge. Jaemin reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, "Shame," and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, barely contact, but it sent heat through her entire body. "You make me want to believe that," he whispered. Then Junseo cried, and the moment shattered. By the end of the week, Nia had established routines, feeding schedules, sleep training. She taught Mrs. Choi the humming technique, showed Jaemin how to hold Junseo during tummy time without looking like he was defusing a bomb. The penthouse felt less like a fortress, more like something fragile and new. Jaimin started coming home earlier, started asking questions, not about tactics or schedules, but about Junseo's personality, his preferences, the tiny ways he was already becoming a person. One evening, Nia found him in the nursery, just watching his son sleep. "What are you thinking?" she asked. He didn't turn. "That I spent 15 years building an empire that will destroy him if I'm not careful." His voice was barely audible. "And I don't know how to dismantle something that's kept me alive this long." "Maybe you don't have to dismantle it," Nia said. "Maybe you just walk away. It's not that simple." "It never is." He looked at her then, and she saw it clearly, the man beneath the power, scared, desperate, trying to be good in a world that rewarded violence. "If I leave," he said, "they'll come for us anyway, the rivals, the allies who feel betrayed, everyone who has something to lose. Then we deal with it." "We?" Naya's breath caught. She hadn't meant to say that, hadn't meant to include herself in a future that was never supposed to be hers. But looking at him now, at this man who was trying so hard to be more than what he'd been made into, she couldn't take it back. "Yeah," she said softly. "We." The call came at midnight. Jamin's phone buzzed once. He read the message, and every ounce of warmth drained from his face. "What?" Nia asked. He looked at her, and she saw it in his eyes before he spoke. "Someone in my organization leaked your location." His voice was lethal calm. "Lee Sung-ho knows exactly where you are." Outside, in the Seoul night, a car engine started. The hunter had found his prey. The first fire started at dawn. Jamin's shipping warehouse in Incheon, 30 million in inventory, gone in 20 minutes. By the time the fire department arrived, there was nothing left but smoke and ash and a message spray-painted across the remaining wall in red. "Tick-tock." The second hit came 2 hours later. A restaurant in Gangnam, one of his legitimate fronts. No fire this time. Just bullets through the windows during breakfast service. No casualties, but the message was clear. "We can reach you anywhere." By noon, 3 more properties had been targeted. Clean, coordinated strikes that screamed professional planning. Naya watched Jamin pace the secure room, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean that sounded like violence wrapped in silk. His knuckles were white. A vein pulsed in his temple. When he finally hung up, the silence was suffocating. "How bad?" she asked. 40 million. 6 locations. His voice was eerily calm. And a phone call. "From?" "Lee Sung-ho." Jamin's jaw tightened. "He wants to negotiate." Nia's stomach dropped. "Negotiate what?" He looked at her, and she saw the answer before he spoke. "You." The ultimatum came at 2 p.m., delivered via encrypted message that Jamin read aloud in a voice devoid of emotion. "The woman who calmed your air. Deliver her to us by midnight, and the attacks stop. Refuse, and we dismantle everything you've built. Your empire, your allies, your son's future. You have 12 hours to choose between power and weakness." Nia's hands went cold. "They're bluffing." "They're not." Jamin set down the phone with deliberate care. "Sung-ho has been waiting for an opening like this for years. He'll burn everything I own to prove I'm vulnerable. Because of me. Because he's a dead man who doesn't know it yet." The words should have sounded like bravado. Instead, they sounded like a promise. Mrs. Choi appeared in the doorway, Junseo in her arms. The baby was fussing, reaching toward Nia with grabbing hands. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Choi said quietly. "He won't settle." Nia took him automatically, and Junseo immediately relaxed against her chest. The room went silent. She looked at Jamin, saw the way his expression shifted. Pain, frustration, something that looked like grief for a choice not yet made. "I need a moment," he said, and left. Nia found him in his office an hour later, staring at a map of Seoul marked with red pins, burning properties, active threats, weak points in his defense. "How many people work for you?" she asked from the doorway. He didn't look up. "Directly? 300. Indirectly? Thousands." "And how many have families?" His hand stilled on the map. "Most." "Then you already know what you have to do." "No." The word came out sharp, immediate. "Don't even think it." I'm a crisis consultant, Jamin. I de-escalate situations exactly like this. If giving them what they want stops the violence, it won't stop anything. He turned, and the fury in his eyes made her step back. You think they want you for leverage? They want you to break me, to prove that Kang Jamin can be controlled through attachment. And when they're done using you as a demonstration, he stopped, jaw working. They'll kill you, he finished quietly, slowly, publicly, as a warning. Naya's breath caught, but she forced her voice steady. Then what's your alternative? Watch your empire burn? Let innocent people die because I won't sacrifice you. He closed the distance between them in 3 strides. Not for the empire, not for anything. That's not your choice to make. Yes, it is. His hands came up, framing her face with a gentleness that contradicted the violence in his voice. I've made a career out of calculating acceptable losses. I've traded lives for profit, loyalty for power, but you... He stopped, breathing hard. You walked onto a plane and helped my son when you had no reason to. You stayed when anyone sane would have run. You made me remember what it feels like to want something that isn't built on fear. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. I won't lose you to my own weakness. I won't. Caring about people isn't weakness, Nia whispered. In my world, it's the only weakness that matters. Then maybe, she said, voice breaking, it's time to leave that world behind. For a moment, one suspended, impossible moment, she thought he might kiss her. His gaze dropped to her mouth, his breathing changed, and something raw and desperate flickered across his face. Then his phone buzzed. He stepped back, jaw tight, and answered, listened. His expression went from controlled to lethal. When? A pause. How many? Another pause. I'm on my way. He hung up, already moving toward the door. Lee's men just hit the safe house where my lieutenants' families are staying. They're sending a message. Anyone close to me is a target. Jamin, I'm choosing protection over profit, he said, not looking back. For the first time in 15 years, I'm choosing people over power. And it starts with keeping you alive. He called for his guards. No one in or out. She doesn't leave this room. Clear? 3 men nodded. Jamin finally looked at her, and his eyes held something that looked like an apology, or a goodbye. I'll fix this, he said. I promise. Then he was gone. Naya waited 20 minutes, then she walked to the window, looked down at the city spread below like a glittering trap, and made a decision that would either save them all or destroy everything. She thought about Junseo sleeping peacefully in the next room, about Jaimin's hands on her face, his voice breaking on the word weakness, about all the people caught in the crossfire of a war that started because she'd shown compassion to a crying baby. She pulled out her phone, typed a single message to a number she'd memorized from Jamin's screen. I'll come willingly, alone. Leave everyone else out of this. She hit send before she could second guess. Then she slipped past the guards, one distracted by a call, the others checking perimeters, and disappeared into the Seoul night. By the time Jamin returned, her room was empty. The only thing she'd left behind was a note on the pillow in careful handwriting. Some sacrifices are worth making. Protect your son. N. The paper crumpled in his fist, and Kang Jamin, who hadn't screamed since childhood, who'd learned to control every emotion, who'd built an empire on ice-cold calculation, roared. They took Junseo 3 hours after Nia disappeared. Mrs. Choi found the nursery empty, window open, security footage wiped. No struggle, no sound. Just gone. The note came 10 minutes later. We have them both. Warehouse 7, Incheon Port. Come alone, or the baby learns what his father really is. Naya woke to concrete and rust. Her head throbbed where they'd hit her, ambushed 2 blocks from the penthouse, professional and fast. She'd managed to send her location before they'd taken her phone, but had anyone seen it? Junseo's cries brought her fully conscious. He was in a car seat across the room, screaming himself raw. 2 armed men stood guard, and a third, older, impeccably dressed, sat in a leather chair like he was conducting a board meeting instead of a kidnapping. Lee Sung-ho. Ms. Carter. His English was flawless. You're awake. Good. We have much to discuss. Nia's wrists were zip-tied, but she forced herself upright. Let the baby go. Your fight is with Jaemin, not an infant. My fight is with weakness. Sung-ho stood, buttoned his suit jacket. Kang Jaemin built an empire on fear, but fear is brittle. Attachment. He gestured toward Jun-seo. That's exploitable. You're using a child as leverage. I'm teaching a lesson. He moved closer. For 15 years, Kang has operated like he's untouchable, invincible. But you showed us the crack in his armor, the one thing he can't control. Love isn't weakness. In our world, Sung-ho smiled coldly, it's fatal. Jun-seo screamed harder, face crimson, choking on his own cries. Please, Nia said, hating the desperation in her voice. Let me hold him. He's terrified. Sung-ho considered, then nodded to a guard. They cut her ties but kept guns trained as she lifted Jun-seo. The baby grabbed onto her like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. His cries quieted to hiccups. Remarkable, Sung-ho murmured. Kang's own blood trusts you more than his father. That must burn. Nia said nothing, just held the baby and calculated exits. 2 doors, 4 armed men, no clear escape. She was still calculating when the lights went out. Jaemin came through the darkness like a nightmare given forms. The first guard went down silently, throat crushed, gun taken. The second managed half a shout before his windpipe collapsed. When the backup generator kicked on, Sung-ho found himself staring at Kang Jaemin, blood spattered and holding a gun that looked like an extension of his hand. You touched my son, Jaemin said quietly. 5 more men poured in. Jaemin moved like violence choreographed, precise, brutal, efficient. He shot one in the knee, broke another's arm, moved through them like they were obstacles instead of people. Nia had seen crisis situations, hostage negotiations, armed standoffs. She'd never seen someone dismantle human beings with this kind of cold precision. Sung-ho pulled his own weapon, pressed it to Nia's temple. Everything stopped. There it is, Sung-ho said, breathing hard. The great Kang Jaemin. Reduced to this. He shoved the gun harder against Nia's head. Jun-seo wailed. Drop it, or I paint the wall with her brain and your son watches. Jaemin's hand didn't waver, but his eyes went to Nia's, and she saw it clearly. He would burn the world. He would kill everyone in this room, consequences be damned. He was choosing her over everything. Don't, Nia said quietly. I'm not losing you. His voice was gravel and glass. You already made your choice. She shifted Jun-seo carefully, still meeting Jaemin's gaze. You chose protection over power. You chose people over empire. Don't let him take that from you. Touching, Sung-ho sneered. But he's still the same monster. The gun, Nia said, never breaking eye contact with Jaemin. Put down the gun. For 3 seconds, nothing moved. Then Jaemin's weapon clattered to the floor. Sung-ho laughed, pressed the barrel harder. Pathetic. Kang Jaemin on his knees for a... Nia moved. Years of crisis training, muscle memory from safety courses, pure desperate instinct. She twisted, used Jun-seo's weight to throw Sung-ho off balance, and drove her elbow into his throat. The gun went off. The bullet hit the wall 6 inches from her head. Then Jaemin was there, disarming Sung-ho with surgical brutality. 1 hit to disarm, another to disable. The third would have killed him. Stop! Nia's voice cut through the violence. Jaemin, stop! He froze, fist cocked back, breathing like he'd run miles. Blood dripped from his knuckles. Sung-ho lay gasping beneath him. You're not that man anymore, Nia said, voice shaking. Jun-seo cried against her chest. You're a father, Havos. You're someone who chose love over fear. Don't let him pull you back. Jaemin stared at Sung-ho like he was deciding between execution and mercy. Then his phone buzzed. He answered without looking away from his enemy, listened. His expression went from fury to something hollow. I understand, he said quietly, and hung up. He looked at Nia, and she saw devastation behind the blood. My council voted, he said, unanimously. The empire is done. What? They said I've become compromised, weak. They're dissolving the organization, redistributing territories. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Effective immediately. I'm out. Sung-ho laughed wetly. You're nothing without... I'm a father, Jaemin said, standing. That's more than you'll ever be. He called the police himself, gave his statement, handed over evidence that would dismantle half the underground operations in Seoul, including his own. When the sirens approached, he finally allowed himself to look at Nia. I'm sorry, he said, for bringing you into this, for everything you've lost because of me. Nia shifted Junseo to one arm, reached out with the other, their hands clasped. You didn't lose anything that mattered, she said softly. The empire burned on the evening news. Arrests, asset seizures, an entire criminal infrastructure collapsing under its own weight. And in a quiet apartment far from the penthouse, Kang Jae-min, former syndicate boss, now just a man, held his son and watched the ashes settle. Nia stood beside them, hand on his shoulder. What now? She asked. Jaemin looked at Junseo, then at her. Now, he said quietly. We try something harder than violence. What's that? Peace. Outside, Seoul continued its neon dance, unaware that one of its darkest kings had just chosen light. And in the ruins of an empire, something new began to grow. The penthouse sold in 3 days. Everything inside, the Italian marble, the custom furniture, the art worth more than most people earned in a lifetime, went to pay legal fees, restitution, and blood money to families owed debts that could never truly be settled. Jaemin signed the papers without hesitation. Naya watched him across the bare living room, morning light cutting through empty windows. He looked smaller somehow without the trappings of power. Just a man in jeans and a plain shirt, hair disheveled, ink still crawling up his neck, but meaning something different now. Not oaths, just scars. Any regrets? She asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Every day. He looked at her. Just not about this. The betrayals came systematically. Former allies turned informants overnight. Men who'd sworn blood oaths testified in exchange for immunity. Business partners scrubbed their records clean, erasing decades of association like Jaemin had never existed. His name became poison in the circles that once feared it. Nia found him on the balcony of their temporary apartment, modest, anonymous, the kind of place that didn't ask questions. He was staring at the city like it was written in a language he no longer understood. Park Hyun-woo flipped, he said without turning, gave prosecutors everything. Names, dates, operations going back 12 years. He was your lieutenant. He was my friend. Jaemin's jaw tightened. I stood at his daughter's wedding, held his grandson when he was born. Nia moved beside him, close, but not touching. You can't control how people react when the structure collapses. I know. He exhaled slowly. But knowing doesn't make it hurt less. She let the silence hold space for his grief. This was new. This version of Jaemin, who allowed himself to feel, to break, to be human in all the messy, painful ways he had spent 15 years avoiding. Do you know what the hardest part is? He asked quietly. What? Not knowing who I am without it. He turned to face her. I was 10 when my father started training me, 15 when I made my first deal, 23 when I took over. I've been Kang Jae-min, head of the organization, for so long. He stopped, something raw in his expression. I don't know how to be anyone else. Then maybe, Nia said gently, you get to figure it out. Junseo thrived in the quiet. No guards hovering, no hushed phone calls, in rooms he wasn't allowed to enter. Just routines, breakfast, playtime, naps synchronized with the sun. He started laughing. Real, belly-deep giggles that lit up the small apartment like fireworks. The first time it happened, Jaemin froze. Did you hear that? He looked at Nia like she'd performed a miracle. He's never, not once. He's happy, Nia said, smiling as Junseo grabbed his father's finger and squealed. He feels safe. Jaemin lifted his son carefully. pressed his forehead to Junseo's. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "I spent his entire life building walls to protect him," he said hoarsely. "And all he needed was for me to tear them down." 2 months in, the nightmares started. Nia woke to find Jaemin's side of the couch. They'd been taking turns, maintaining boundaries neither had the courage to cross. Empty. She found him in the kitchen, hands braced against the counter, breathing like he'd been running. "Same dream?" she asked. He nodded. "The warehouse. But in the dream, I don't stop. I kill Sung-ho, then everyone else. And you're watching with Junseo, and the look on your face..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "Like I'm the monster you were afraid I was." Nia moved beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You're not that man." "How do you know?" "Because that man wouldn't have nightmares about it." She turned to face him. "You're grieving the person you had to be to survive." "That's not the same as wanting to be him again." His hand found hers on the counter, fingers lacing through hers with careful intention. "What if I don't know how to be anything else?" he whispered. "Then we figure it out together." The words hung between them. Together, we, all the promises neither had been brave enough to make explicit. Spring came to Seoul gradually. Cherry blossoms flooded the streets in waves of pink and white. Junseo took his first steps in a park, where no one knew Jaemin's name, where he was just another father celebrating his son's milestone with shaking hands and an iPhone camera. Nia watched them from a bench. Jaemin crouched low, arms outstretched, face split in a grin so genuine it made her chest ache. He'd gotten a job, consulting work for a security firm, legitimate and boring, and exactly what he needed. He came home tired instead of wired, complained about meetings instead of body counts, talked about 401ks like they were revolutionary. He was rebuilding himself from scratch. And Nia, she'd extended her contract, then extended it again, then stopped pretending she was planning to leave. That evening, after Junseo was asleep, Jaemin found her packing. His face went carefully blank. "You're leaving." "My apartment lease in the States ended," Nia said, folding a sweater. "I need to deal with storage, forward my mail, tie up loose ends." "How long?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. He was quiet, and when she looked up, something vulnerable had cracked through his composure. "Or you could stay," he said quietly. Nia's hands stilled. "Jaemin, not for safety, not for Junseo." He crossed to her, took her hands in his, and the touch was electric. "Stay because I'm in love with you, because I wake up thinking about you and fall asleep wishing you were closer, because you've seen every broken part of me and haven't run." His voice dropped. "Stay because I want to build something real with you, not empire, not power, just us." Nia's breath caught. This man, who'd commanded armies, who'd been feared across continents, who'd dismantled everything he'd built for a chance at peace, was standing in a cramped apartment asking her to choose him. Not the king, not the monster, just the man. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "So am I. I don't know if I'm ready. Neither am I." He smiled, tentative and real. "But I'd like to try, if you'll have me." Nia looked at the suitcase, at the life she'd been preparing to return to. Empty, safe, lonely. Then at Jaemin. At Junseo sleeping in the next room. At the future they could build from the ashes of everything they'd survived. She unpacked the sweater. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try." When he kissed her, it tasted like spring and second chances and all the beautiful, terrifying possibilities of starting over. Outside, Seoul bloomed. And inside, 2 broken people began the harder work of healing. Together. 6 months later, the ocean became their sanctuary. The cottage sat perched on a cliff outside Busan, far enough from Seoul that the past felt like a story they'd once heard rather than lived. White walls, weathered wood, windows that framed the East Sea in shades of blue that changed with the light. Simple. Peaceful. Theirs. Jaemin stood at the kitchen sink washing breakfast dishes, a task so mundane it still felt foreign. His hands, once accustomed to signing death warrants and brokering million-dollar deals, now scrubbed oatmeal from Junseo's bowl with concentrated care. "You're doing it wrong," Nia said from the doorway, smiling. He looked up, soap suds clinging to his forearms. "There's a wrong way to wash dishes? You're treating it like defusing a bomb." She moved beside him, hip bumping his. "Relax, it's just breakfast." Just breakfast. Just laundry, just another morning where the biggest decision was whether to take Junseo to the beach or the park. Jaemin had never felt more powerless, and some days it terrified him. That afternoon, while Junseo napped, Nia found him on the deck staring at his phone, not using it, just holding it like a talisman from another life. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Park Hyun-woo's daughter got married again. His voice was carefully neutral. "I saw photos. She looked happy." Nia waited, knowing there was more. "I wasn't invited." He set down the phone. 12 years I knew that family, and now I'm just erased, like I never mattered. "You mattered," Nia said quietly, "but the version of you they knew doesn't exist anymore. I know." He rubbed his face, but knowing doesn't make it easier. Some days I wake up and reach for power I no longer have, influence that evaporated. I start to plan strategies for problems that aren't mine to solve anymore, and He stopped, jaw working. "I don't know how to just be, Nia. I only know how to conquer." She moved behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist, pressed her cheek to his back. "Then conquer this. Conquer the quiet. Make peace your empire." His hands covered hers. "And if I can't? Then we'll figure it out." She tightened her hold. "But you don't get to disappear into who you were. Junseo needs you here, present, real." A pause. "And you?" "I need you too." The admission came easier now. After months of therapy, both together and separate, after confronting the grief they'd each been carrying, Nia had learned that loving someone didn't mean losing herself. That attachment wasn't betrayal of the daughter she'd lost. It was honoring her by choosing life anyway. Junseo said his first word on a Tuesday. Not mama or dada, but ni, his approximation of Nia's name. Jaemin looked stricken for exactly 3 seconds before his face cracked into pure joy. "Did you hear that? He said your name first." Nia laughed, scooping up the toddler who'd become hers in every way that mattered. "It's easier to say than appa." "Or he knows who really runs this house." Jaemin moved close, wrapped them both in his arms. His family. Not bound by blood or power, but by choice. By love that had survived everything designed to destroy it. That evening, after Junseo was asleep, Jaemin led Nia to the beach. Sunset painted the sky in violent purples and golds, and the sand was still warm beneath their feet. "I've been thinking," he said, taking her hands, "about what kind of man I want Junseo to remember." "And?" "Not the king, not the strategist." His thumbs traced circles on her wrists. "I want him to remember someone who chose love over fear, who walked away from power because family mattered more." Nia's throat tightened. "He will. I want that for us too." Jaemin dropped to one knee, and Nia's breath caught. He pulled a simple silver band from his pocket. No diamonds, no flash, just solid and real. "Not because tradition demands it, not to claim you or bind you, but because I choose you, Nia Carter, every day. Every version of yourself you've shown me. I choose us." Tears blurred her vision. "Jaemin, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I know attachment still scares you. I know you're still healing, but I need you to know I'm not going anywhere. Whether you say yes today or 3 years from now or never, I'm here, building this quiet life, choosing you." Nia pulled him to his feet, framed his face with shaking hands. "Yes," she whispered, "I choose you too." When he kissed her, the ocean roared approval. They were still standing there, foreheads pressed together, when Jaemin's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, then saw the message preview. "The past sends its regards." His blood went cold. Attached was a photo. Junseo in the cottage window, taken from the cliff road, time-stamped 30 minutes ago. Below it, a single line. Did you really think you could just walk away? Jamin's hands trembled as he showed Nia. She stared at the screen, at their son's innocent face framed in crosshairs, and felt the terror she'd thought they'd escaped come flooding back. Who? She breathed. I don't know. His voice had gone lethal calm, the old Jamin bleeding through. But they made a mistake. What mistake? He looked at her, eyes dark with promise. They threatened my family. And I'm not powerless anymore. I'm something far more dangerous. What's that? A man with nothing left to lose. The syndicate elders came at dawn. 3 black cars on the cliff road, moving with the precision of a funeral procession. Jamin watched from the window, Junseo asleep against his chest, and felt Naya's hand find his shoulder. How many? She asked quietly. 5, maybe 6. His jaw tightened. The Council of Shadows. They only gather for executions or absolutions. Which is this? I don't know. They met on the beach, neutral ground, as tradition demanded. The elders emerged in tailored suits that looked wrong against the sunrise, faces weathered by decades of violence disguised as business. Elder Song spoke first. Kang Jae-min, you walked away from the family, dismantled what your father built. Betrayed blood oaths sworn in darkness. Jamin stood perfectly still, Nia beside him, Junseo in her arms now. I did. You chose a woman over the empire, a child over conquest. Song's eyes were unreadable. In our world, such choices warrant death. Nia's breath caught. Jamin's hand found hers, squeezed once. But, Song continued, we have watched you these 6 months, watched you live quietly, raise your son, harm no one. He paused. The woman you chose, she did not seek power. She sought only to calm a crying child, and in doing so, she showed you a path we thought you'd never take. The other elders nodded, a choreographed acknowledgement. The council votes to release you, Song said formally. Your oaths are dissolved, your blood debts paid, you are no longer of the family. He bowed slightly. You are simply a man, free. The words hung in the salt air like a benediction. And the photo? Jamin's voice was controlled. The threat? A test. Song's expression softened fractionally. To see if you would return to violence. To see if the change was real. He looked at Nia. You came to us instead, asked for peace, not war. That is why we came. Jamin exhaled slowly, the tension bleeding from his shoulders. Thank you. Do not thank us. We did not do this for you. Song's gaze moved to Junseo. We did it for him, so he might grow without the weight you carried. He turned to leave, then paused. Your father would be ashamed of who you've become. Jamin smiled slightly. I know. Good. Song almost smiled back. Shame is how we know we've changed. They married in autumn when the maple leaves turned the coast into flame. No guests. No ceremony. Just a courthouse in Busan where they signed papers that made official what had been true for months. They were family, bound by choice rather than blood or circumstance. Junseo served as witness, toddling between them in a tiny suit, giggling as Jamin lifted him high. You ready for this? Nia asked, adjusting Jamin's tie. He caught her hand, pressed it to his chest, where his heart beat steady and sure. I've dismantled empires. This should be easy. Liar. Terrified, he admitted, grinning. But the good kind. The official pronounced them married. They kissed while Junseo cheered, and Nia thought about the plane, about the crying baby and the dangerous man, and the moment everything changed. Some stories begin with fear. The best ones end with choice. That evening, while Nia prepared dinner, she heard it, Junseo's cry from the nursery. Not distressed, just fussy. The sound that once would have sent her running, chest tight with phantom grief and instinct. She started toward the room, then stopped. Jaemin was already there. She watched from the doorway as he lifted his son with practiced ease, no hesitation, no fear. Junseo's cries shifted immediately, became searching whimpers that quieted as Jaemin hummed, low, off-key, but steady. "I've got you," Jaemin murmured, swaying gently. "Always. You're safe, you're loved, and you never have to be afraid of who I was, because I'm choosing every day to be someone better for you, for us." Junseo's breathing evened out, little fists unclenching against his father's shoulder. Nia felt tears slip down her cheeks, not from grief this time, but from recognition. The cycle was broken. The man who once couldn't calm his own son now held him like he'd been born, knowing how. Jaemin looked up, caught her watching. "You okay?" She crossed to them, wrapped her arms around both her boys. "Yeah, we're okay." Later, after Junseo was asleep and they lay tangled together in the dark, Jaemin whispered, "Do you ever regret it, walking toward me on that plane?" Nia was quiet for a moment, thinking about everything they'd survived. The violence, the grief, the slow, painful work of becoming people worthy of the peace they'd chosen. "No," she said finally. "Some power is taken, some is earned." She pressed her lips to his jaw, "And some is given freely, by someone brave enough to answer a crying child." Outside, the ocean whispered its eternal rhythm, and inside, 3 people who'd been broken by different violence slept soundly, held together by something stronger than fear, love, choice, the quiet courage of starting over. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something, don't let it fade here. Subscribe to the channel for